Trustee elections, poorer test scores, expired labor contracts, a newly minted majority government. Many factors at play as the school year begins. Joining us now to tell us what they're on the lookout for. Michael Barrett, he is the president of the Ontario Public School Boards Association. Ryan McLaughlin, newly re-elected president of the Ontario Teachers Federation. Annie Kidder, executive director, People for Education. Doretta Wilson, executive director, the Society for Quality Education. And Caroline Alfonso, who's the education reporter at the Globe and Mail. And welcome everybody to our somewhat different digs here on the fourth floor, and we thank you for rolling with the punches today. You just saw the interview we did with the Minister of Education. You saw how tight-lipped, understandably I guess she was, on the teacher contract issues. What do you see out there that she was perhaps a little more tight-lipped about?
Well, nobody wants a repeat of what happened in the last round of contract negotiations, where everything was done in the media, where the previous Minister of Education came out and said what she had to say. So I've been
the Premier actually started it with a YouTube video.
That's true.
That
I
first
do
salvo
recall
in those
that.
negotiations.
That is true.
That was McGuinty.
That was McGuinty, and so I've been to the FO conference that they had that you mentioned, and I've been to the OSSTF where at FO Premier Wynne spoke and people listened to her, and the mood was not receptive. There were some questions out there. The Education Minister Lysandles has said that that there's a net zero budget for education, but there is money for increases. So it depends how they move that money around. There's been talk about benefit packages, that consolidating benefit packages, maybe some money can be freed up for wages. I feel like, things are going to be calm for a little while, and then if something happens that OSSTF, for example, does not like, we're going to hear more about it.
It's not unusual for the contract to expire and negotiations to be continuing, even though the contract's up and the kids are back at school, right, Michael?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay, so you're not unusually concerned yet, is that fair to say?
That's fair to say, because I don't think we've had a contract, and I could be corrected in my living history of being involved in public education, that we've actually had a contract by the end of the expiry of the current contract. So I'm not concerned that we don't have one in place at this point.
What would get you concerned?
My concern would be where if the government changes their approach, if they take an approach, because right now it's been conciliatory, it's been engaging different parties. My concern would be if the government changes their methodology, right, in the sense that they have a majority government. They've been listening very, very closely over the last 2 years as a minority. Whether or not that changes the methodology by which they engage both school boards and, by the way, they engage our teachers as well.
But they say they have a new law in place, this Bill 122,
122,
which clearly says what everybody's responsibilities are.
Correct.
Is that working well so far?
Well, so far so good. Because certainly OPSPA and other school board associations.
OPSPA is you, School Boards
Yes, Ontario
Association.
Public School Board Association, but also our counterparts, French First Language and our separate school board associations, lobbied very, very hard in order to be able to be inclusive in Bill 122. We've always been an element of saying we need a good process, because I think certainly the last round, or if you even want to call it a round, maybe a round in a boxing match, but did not necessarily have a process by which the parties could absolutely engage in discussion.
I think Ryan would agree with that, and I want to bring you in to ask. You heard what the minister said when I said, how bad are relationships right now between the government and the teachers? And she said, oh, much improved. Do you agree?
I think probably from a year or so, 2 years ago, last September, yes.
Much
I mean,
improved.
there is an opportunity here. She has said that, and I think the federations want to see that opportunity come to fruition.
Where is the opportunity if they have said net zero is the outcome? They've told you what the outcome is before the negotiations start. How's that an opportunity?
Well, I think the assumption would be that the only thing teachers want is salary increases. And there are a lot of other things that need to be discussed.
Such as?
Composition, class size, workload, initiatives, teacher autonomy, professional learning, conditions that children face with their teachers every day.
Okay. You two, I want to get into on the issue, not that teachers aren't, obviously they are interested in the quality of the education, but you're less invested in the contract negotiations, and I think your broader visions, if I can put it that way, is to keep an eye on the system as a whole and where you see things going. To that end, do you get concerned when contracts expire, negotiations take place, gauntlets have been sort of put down, that the contract situation is going to dominate the education frontier for the next little while?
Well, I think it's not unusual, and we've seen this in the past, that contracts expire and the negotiations go on for sometimes months after that, so that a deal isn't reached sometimes well into the new year. Where I would be concerned is in the broader picture with what actually gets negotiated and when it's going to, whatever gets negotiated and how it plays out over the next 4 years. Because I do think Carolyn is right. I think we won't see a lot of salary increases, but I think we'll be borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. So there'll be money coming from benefit packages, sick leave packages, that sort of thing, in order to give a modest salary increase. Because the government is walking a fine tightrope right now, because with the state of the Ontario economy, with the bond rating agencies ready to pounce to say, you do anything that we think is out of line, we're going to lower your credit rating, and that's going to cost the province more money. So I think they have to be very careful right now, and I think the minister in her interview was doing just that. She was trying to pussyfoot around the issues on that one.
Annie, how much concern do you have that the contract dwarfs everything else?
I don't think that it does. I think that all sides are working towards a settlement, which is different than the last time, which felt like people were trying to win rather than, negotiating a contract so that you can find a settlement. And I think that for me, what dwarfs everything else is now you have a majority government. What are you going to do with it? Yes. So for me, the issues are less about that. I think there is good faith on both sides. I think, Caroline, you're totally right. Nobody wants a repeat of what happened before. So to me now, it's okay. Now you have a real chance, and a vision has been released. It could be a little tiny bit more visionary, I think, the vision, but there's a chance to do a whole bunch of other stuff within education. And I think even from a financial point of view, to deal with the sort of net sum game, there are cuts. There are financial things that are going to happen. There are already funding has gone out to boards saying you're going to have to work harder to find some savings. So I think that the money issues are going to be there, front and center as we move into the mandate of this government. But that the bigger thing is, so we've got full day kindergarten. We're doing okay. We're obviously struggling a little bit on the math. What else are you going to do?
Well, let me follow up on that. Ryan, the Liberals do have a majority now. Mm-hmm. What do you think, now that you know they're going to be there for the next 4 years, what do you think is possible now that might not have been possible in a minority parliament?
Well, I think it's the consistency of having the same people to deal with and develop the relationships internally with the Ministry of Education and the government and move forward together. I mean, our issues really haven't changed a lot in a number of years, and I think with the majority, hopefully, with their goodwill and us coming to the table, we can work through some of those things together.
How do you see that, Michael?
Well, I think it's a positive as well, because under Bill 122, our concern was if there was another minority government, would Bill 122 be passed? Or would another government come in and want to revoke that? And I think one thing that we've seen consistently since 2008 is each successive Minister of Education invents the process of negotiation. Mm-hmm. And so therefore we cannot have the Liz Sandal show on determining what's negotiation going to look like. I know Bill 122 is not perfect, but at least it's a process. And as Ryan has said, I know consistently they've put the legislation in place. They're going to abide by it. They're going to live with it. The proof will be in the pudding on how much we get to participate. But the roles are defined, and I think Bill 122 is going to go a long way. We just have to look 3,000 kilometers to the west and see what's happening in British Columbia that has no process, no determination of what roles are. And at least I'm comforted that I know I'm going to sit across the table with a defined role and engagement.
You forgot the last no. No kids in class today, no teachers teaching today.
Correct. Yeah.
As you look at a majority government at Queen's Park now, what do you think that allows for that didn't exist before?
I think it allows for more chances. I think the government would take more chances, whether it be at class sizes or anything else that's on the table, because they're not going to scare parents or scare voters as easily as they did with a minority government. So I think we'll see things come up that we wouldn't have a couple of years ago, like class sizes, for example.
Does that mean larger class sizes?
Could be. I mean, if the government is looking to find efficiencies in the system, what they call efficiencies, to save money, to somehow, as Dorota said, to pay Peter and pay Paul, you have to find that money somewhere else. So you have to take away from another pot. So where is that pot going to be? And I think with the majority government, you'll probably see a little more of that happening.
Does a majority government allow a government, in your view, to close schools that need to be closed, to make class sizes larger than you might otherwise want them to be?
That could certainly be the case, but it can also be a government that, as you said, willing to take risks, maybe try some pilot programs or try, I mean, their big vision, right, in the past was full-day kindergarten. Well, they've done that now. So we now have to see how that's going to play out, whether it really does make a difference for the money that we're spending. And it allows them maybe to say, you know, maybe we should be really looking at the way we're training teachers. Maybe we should be doing, looking at the curriculum, making some changes there that really do help kids, or maybe giving, delivering education in a different way that gives parents more alternatives, that sort of thing. They can do that.
What does the majority, in your view, allow for now?
Well, I think we all agree, so watch out. I think it does allow for taking more chances, and it allows for, so you don't have to be kind of nervous all the time, which you're exactly right about whatever kind of backlash is going to come. So it allows for bravery in terms of educational choices. There's going to be money stuff. There probably are going to be schools that close. There's some incentivizing, the most horrible word in the world, that's being offered to boards to help them with that. But for me too, I hope that, we've just launched a big thing to look at how we define and measure and success in education, and should we have broader goals for that. And I think that there's an openness possible to a whole bunch of discussions in education where you're not just dealing with, one of the biggest problems in education is the political swing back and forth, or just the politics, the incessant politics in it. And so maybe now we can have like 4 years where we're not quite so worried about the politics and we're trying to really do good stuff.
Even though you hate the word, I'm going to repeat it. The incentivizing that the province uses to try to get you, as the guy representing all the school boards, to make unpopular decisions, such as shutting down schools where half the classes are empty now.
Correct.
How's that working?
Well, I mean, certainly, because when you'd asked the question earlier, will a majority government give the government the opportunity to be able to close more schools? Well, unfortunately, trustees make those decisions at the local level. So someone also says, that would they ever get rid of trustees? You got to be kidding! They're not going to get rid of trustees, because who are they going to blame everything on if they get rid of trustees? We are the whipping boys. So, I mean, certainly, when you look at some of the cuts that have taken place, and in certain budgets, in administrative budgets, etc., that are hurting schools, that spec ed is not funded to the level that it needs to be funded. Our north schools are not being funded to the area that they need to be funded. We have many, many issues that I would hope that we have an opportunity to have a very fulsome discussion on. So when you're talking about closing schools, no, it's not working out well. But I think that what we do have is an opportunity in Bill 122 to be engaged in the labor piece, but also to be able to attempt to be able to do some of those things.
How are you spelling peace?
P-I-E-C-E, because I want a piece of the action and a piece
We
of
all
the
want
decision
peace.
making.
You all want P-E-A-C-E as well.
Everybody wants peace.
You reacted quite vigorously in the middle of that
Well, when
answer
you
to
mentioned
something.
special education, because there is one area that I think the government can really do something constructive, is to go in and really examine what's happening in special education. It's become a huge catch-all from everything from kids with physical disabilities to kids with light learning disabilities and gifted kids. And we never really examine how effective it is, especially for that sort of the kids that are falling through the crack kids, I call them, where they they really don't have specific learning disabilities. They just either they haven't been taught to read properly, they're having difficulty with arithmetic, and a lot of that could have been prevented with proper instruction, better teacher training in that instruction. And it's one area where I think it's costing the province a lot of money, and maybe they could find efficiencies there if they did some preventative medicine in that department and really looked at how effective special education is for those children that are having learning issues, because we should really see those numbers of children go down as they are remediated through the school system. And we're not. Plus, the other problem is the amount of tutoring, outside commercial tutoring that is supplementing our school system. We've never really looked at that. I've been after EQAO for a decade to start examining how much tutoring is going on, because we don't really know.
That's interesting. So are you saying that the test scores may actually, the test scores don't reflect the fact that a lot of kids are out there at Kumon, for example,
Possibly.
getting their test scores
We
up.
just don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Caroline, let me, on the issue of test scores, let me get you to weigh in on this now, because, of course, it's the Minister of Education's job to come here and say to people, don't worry, everything's under control. We see there are problems, but we're doing, X, Y, and Z, and as a result, things will be fine somewhere down the road. It's your job to tell us the straight goods. How alarmed should we be that our math scores have gone down?
It has been a huge issue, and it continues to be a huge issue. We should be alarmed that our math scores are gone down. We should definitely, if the proportion of kids in grade 3 and 6 are not doing as well in math as they did 5 years ago, that is an alarming trend. And I think, the minister blames or the government tends to blame teachers. They feel like teachers in the elementary schools aren't specialized in math as they are in high schools, for example. But is it that, or is there something else at play, I wonder? The grade 6 math scores, the minister says, well, it's not that kids don't know basic math facts, it's that the teaching needs some work. And I say to her, well, in grade 6, correct me if I'm wrong, but they use calculators. So maybe that's at play there too. Maybe they don't know the basic math facts. We don't know that for sure. Alberta has taken steps there's been parent surveys and parent petitions right across the country, actually in 3 provinces, Ontario, Alberta, and BC. And Alberta this fall decided that they would make sure that kids in the elementary school level know how to multiply, memorize their multiplication tables. There's been boards in this province, for example, the Peel board, for example, has a 3-year strategy on math to make sure that teachers are up to speed, parents are up to speed, kids are learning. So I think, the minister wants to place the blame perhaps in one area, but I think there needs to be an overall review take place.
Do you feel in the crosshairs on
well, I think
who's
there's a couple of things here. I mean, as a province, as a country, we really have not come to grips with integration of technology into curriculum. So is it the curriculum, or is it simply a partner in the curriculum? I think the last number of years with EQAO, the focus, the concentration, the money, the time that's been devoted only to literacy and language has crowded out so many other areas, not just math, arts, phys ed, everything else that makes a human being. Okay, not just technical literacy. So, and relying on the scores, relying on only one standard, and I say standard because it really isn't, measure. I mean, I'm not going to condemn a child, a teacher, or a system because of one test score. There are summative, formative assessments. Teachers do assessment every single day. They want their students to do well. They wouldn't be in the profession if they didn't.
Okay, having said that though, do you share Doretta's concern that even regardless of what the test scores say, they may not accurately reflect what our kids are learning in the public school system?
That's the curriculum, and again, we work very directly with the government on improving, enhancing curriculum all of the time, but we need the time to do it as well.
The minister seemed to be proud of the fact that 3,000 teachers over the summer decided to get their math skills enhanced. She had a budget of $4 million to send some teachers back to school to do that.
Well, just let me correct you a little bit on an AQ course. That's not teaching you how to do math. That's giving you toolkits on how to teach math in different ways. So it doesn't mean that teachers don't know how to do math. There's it's a plethora of opportunity to learn different ways of differentiating instruction in mathematics.
Understood. Your critics, of course, would say that's proof that our teachers aren't good enough at teaching math.
Well, thousands of them take AQs every summer, Steve.
AQs stand for?
Additional qualifications in
Okay.
all manner of subjects.
Okay.
So it happens to be that the money was there for math, so they took math.
Take
I
it.
think it's really important. These are the kinds of discussions where eventually I start to get uncomfortable, because I think what sometimes happens anyway is we start to think, well, maybe it's this and maybe it's this, or we instinctively feel it must be for this reason. And I think in education, that's why it'd be nice to have less politics, that we could actually look at evidence. So it seems to me in Canada some good research needs to be done to look at why has this change happened, because actually the teaching hasn't changed, the schools haven't changed, the curriculum hasn't changed, but the scores changed. So what's different now than 5 years ago?
Do we know? No?
Well, I think one of the things, so some people have posited that perhaps the focus on literacy has actually come at the cost of math. People are public attitudes towards math. Maybe it's all parents' fault. I mean, I don't mean that. I mean that, but there is a public kind of perception that somehow math is hard. I don't like math. So maybe we have somehow as a society done something. I actually don't know the answer, and I think it's better to go, we don't know what it is, rather than trying to go, it's this. Let's spend a couple of $1 million on this, and that'll fix it. Because I think we're not really sure. So we need some academics to look at it.
I find it amazing that nobody wants to admit it. Nobody wants to say, let's assess the curriculum. Let's look at the curriculum. Let's see what's wrong.
But the curriculum isn't different, though. The curriculum is the same as it was 5 years ago. So when you see a change, in research, you have to look at, so what else has changed in the last 5 years? Not the curriculum, not the teaching. So. And I don't know, but we should look at all of it. I mean, we have to look at a whole bunch of things.
We're pouring millions of dollars into certain areas, thinking this is the issue at play here. And it would be interesting. I mean, don't put $4 million into teacher training. Maybe see what maybe examine the entire issue.
Yeah.
But I want more than math.
Yeah,
Yes,
more than
exactly.
that.
Meaning what?
Yes.
You want what?
I want more than just looking at one particular skill that our children are being taught.
Yeah,
there are a broad range of other issues that we've got to be able to look at. We have poverty in schools. We have mental health issues. We have Aboriginals who don't get the same education. The concern that I have is that math becomes the issue of the day.
Yeah.
It was 4 years ago, if we maybe could go back in the archives of the agenda, we could look at why are literacy skills so low, and we could be having the same sort of discussion, maybe not with me, maybe Annie, you were around, we could have that discussion. My concern is that we cannot just attack a singular issue. We have to look at education as a whole. There's partnerships, stakeholders. It's more than just math. I want more than math. Yes, we're not doing what we need to do, but we have mental health issues at our school that is just as significant that costs lives.
I did hear Doretta say, however,
the two subjects we know as a society are crucial for all other learning are literacy and mathematics. And those are the two we've decided, okay, we're going to assess those and make sure that we have those, because if we can make sure that kids are literate, we can prevent poverty happening, because it's kids, it's kids who can't.
I'm not sure I would agree
well,
with
I
that.
look,
I think that's a utopian viewpoint
we
of being
deal
able to
with
teach
kids,
skills.
middle school boys who are reading at a grade 2 level. Those are kids who will drop out of school, who will never be able to get a job because they have no skills, because they can't even read. So that's part of the problem. And if we can prevent at least that little area from going on, we can prevent poverty from recurring in that area. We're not going to cure poverty throughout the province in every aspect, but you can start somewhere. The schools can do that. Doing some prevention,
I would challenge you to start teaching
you
music.
can make there.
Yes.
But
That too.
pedagogically,
No one is. I'm not
is
saying.
logical.
Look, I'm not saying we shouldn't have music. I did the arts when I
You
was in
need it.
school.
It forms
It should
the
be a
brain-
balance,
pieces of the
but
brain.
we have decided. I agree with you. My kids all took music. I did too. It's important. But we have decided those two areas are where we're investing our large-scale assessments.
But I would argue, and having looked at a lot of research, that we may have decided that, and even the OECD says, they're easy to teach, easy to test, so, we can focus on those and measure those. But I think there's a lot of evidence now, and employers are saying now, and post-secondary universities and colleges and people going on to work, that there's a whole range of skills that are as important, and you have to have all of them together. So you have to have the innovation, the creativity and innovation. You've got to have those social emotional skills that are
Looking at that element of the
unfortunately
whole
called kind
child.
of soft.
Exactly.
Well, we
But
have a
those are-
curriculum to cover all that,
but
and
you
we
have
want
to-
and outcomes to cover
But
those.
you can't say one
The
is more
problem is we're not
important than the
covering
other.
I don't think
Yeah.
anybody
We're
is,
not
but
covering
we're
it.
not saying that. But you need to be able to read in order to learn. You need to be able to know math in order to
But
study
you
music.
also need
and
to
help
be able to know how to solve problems, how to work hard, how to persist, how to not give up in the face of
So
whatever.
should we have large-scale assessments in all
We
of
should-
those areas?
Well, we're not
'Cause it
arguing
sounds
for.
like you're
Well,
saying
no,
that.
we are saying we've got to set explicit goals in those other areas for citizenship, for creativity, for health to
do.
cover mental health.
They're in the
We've been
curriculum.
arguing the
no, not-
concept of the whole child
yeah.
for 5 years at
Yeah.
OPSPA. You're doing the
Yeah,
study
yeah.
now on being able to evaluate other
Yeah.
things. It's more than just that. Because I'm an employer as well, just not a trustee. I have this other full-time job in the business world. And it's not just mathematics I'm looking for.
Yeah.
I need the ability for kids, students, to be able to come in to actually work together, project management, and I'm not talking about just these hardcore skills. The creativity, the music, as you were talking about, Ryan, is so critical because it's using that other part.
But having said that, you wouldn't hire somebody who didn't know what 10 times 5 was.
No, but I need to know that. I don't need them to know to memorize it. I need to know they know when to apply it, when to use it, and when it makes sense to be able to use it.
You have to memorize it, and this is what the
But
research
I mean,
is
but
showing.
that's what was funny. I mean, it seemed funny at the time, but maybe it isn't funny, that when they first talked about the math scores the other day when they first came out, I think the EQAO said they actually do know how to multiply, they just don't know when to multiply. And that is really important.
What did that mean?
Well, I think it meant, it's like I know the kind of mechanics, and you can learn the mechanics and test the mechanics pretty easily. Knowing what to do with it, those are part of all those other skills. So if I see a problem, trying to figure out how should I approach this problem? Should I use these math skills? Should I use my language skills? Should I use something I've learned should I use all that I know about citizenship? And skills are important. And I mean, what we're saying, and the evidence is pretty strong, all these other areas, they are skills, they are teachable, learnable, measurable. They're not just like human attributes. And they are the role of schools. And so teaching kids what to do when they're faced with a problem. And if you look at them, and it's not just about employment. I mean, I think we'd like better and more engaged citizens too. They want people who can try out things and fail and go, okay, that didn't work, now I'm going to try this instead.
Let me jump in with about 10 minutes and change to go. I want to put one more thing on the table. And that is this. It sort of jibes with day one of the new year for the school. Parents are going to encounter, it's just normal, a whole range of issues, concerns, problems, criticisms, and stuff they're going to be dealing with starting today and going on until the end of June. And you are all representative of some of the, you'll forgive my use of this word, stakeholders. You all have sort of a piece of the action, not you so much, Caroline. You watch it all and report on it all, but you four have a kind of a piece of the action of all of this. And I would like to have some bit of discussion now on what parents who have problems, what they do. Because I suspect they don't know, do I go to my trustee, do I go to my principal, do I go to my teacher, do I call Annie Kidder, do I call Michael Barrett, do I call a Globe and Mail? What do I do? This is a $22 billion system that is completely opaque to me. I don't know what to do. Want to give us some advice?
Well, first you call Annie Kidder.
Thanks, Caroline. First you call Caroline.
Steve, I really feel for newcomer parents or parents with kids with special needs, because navigating the education system is a tough job. Where do you start? You start with your principal. What if you get no response there? Do you go to your school trustee? Do you email the Ministry of Education for a response? I know Annie at People for Education has a lot of resources for special ed kids, which is great, or special parents with special ed kids, to navigate the system. But, I would say start with your principal.
Is the principal sort of in charge of problem solving at the school?
To some degree.
To some degree.
To some degree. And then move to your local trustee.
I would back it up.
You would go to the teacher first.
Teacher.
Yeah, of course.
Teacher first.
Teacher first.
Teacher first.
Teacher first. I mean,
Yeah,
if
there's a
it's
hierarchy
board,
of,
if it's a board problem, though, if it's some issue with board navigating from one school to the next, for example, wouldn't you go to your principal and see what's there?
Possibly,
first? Yeah.
but I'd be inclined to talk to the teacher first.
Right.
Remember,
School secretaries, they know everything.
That's
School
true,
secretary.
they do.
They know
They
They're really in charge of
or the
that.
custodians.
They really do.
They're very good too.
But you pointed out, you said, Doretta, there's a hierarchy.
Well, there's a
of-
hierarchy of who to go to, and obviously you're going to deal with the teacher first because that's the person that sees your child all the time. So, but you keep running up this whole every level of until you get the response that is required, and some parents don't have the nice cooperative principal who's out there looking for them. Sometimes you get a principal who's like, "Oh, close my door. I don't want to deal with all these problems." And I mean, they're few and far between, but they do exist. Or you go to the superintendent level, and I know of parents who've been banned from setting foot on their own children's school property because
Rightly so or wrongly so?
a bit of both, probably. I mean, some parents just don't know when
That would be a hard
to
one to
back off.
generalize.
And exactly. But there's no recourse outside of the system itself that you're trying to deal with until we have now the provincial ombudsman is now, I believe, has oversight over
Yes.
school boards. So maybe there's a ray of hope
Not
there.
passed
When
yet.
yeah.
Not
Please.
passed
Not
yet.
passed,
No, it's not.
but,
Been advocating against
yes.
it. So
Well, I think there needs to be something because if
that's
you
what the role of trustees for.
well, it is, but there are some, like I said, if your trustee is
95%.
unresponsive,
There's always a
Yeah.
95%
yeah.
rule.
So
Sorry, what does that mean?
95% of people are always doing the best. 95% of the
That's
teachers
right.
are always doing the best. 95% of the principals are doing the best. There's always going to be 5%. 95%
so
of
for
the
that
trustees.
5% of the number of children enrolled in our province, that's a significant
Yes,
portion
but
of
I'm
children.
generalizing as well,
Yeah.
perhaps. But I would go back to your original question and say the first. I agree with you, Ryan, that the first step should be
Yep.
back to the right to the teacher and with the school. But that's what the role of trustee are. We are ombudsmen for the public school system. We're elected. We get our performance reviewed every 4 years. That's what we're there for. The system is very cumbersome. That's what we're there for, and we work in partnership with superintendents. I know the system is very cumbersome, but being around for 3 or 4 terms, as many of our trustees have been, we're there to be able to help parents navigate the system.
And your
Okay, but
children
Michael,
don't stop growing in 4 years.
humor me for a second, Michael. What percentage of trustees have quote unquote real jobs besides that job?
Well, I'm only going to have to generalize on that, Steve, but I would say it's at least half have
Okay.
other jobs.
So half of them do.
Yeah.
Listen, we've all got our anecdotes, right? But if you went to a trustee with a problem and said, here's the issue, can you deal with it? And you got a response back from a trustee, as I have heard, which went something along the lines of, do the best I can, but you realize this is my part-time job and that's my real job, and therefore,
Right.
I think what
How-
you need
should
to
we be
know
satisfied
about
with that?
trustees is that they have direct access to superintendencies, and the superintendencies divide up boards, and they have direct access to
But I think
principals and
that there-
specialists. So
I think to go back to your point, Carol, it is an incredibly complex system, and especially for parents of kids with special needs, and especially for parents who are newcomers to the system. And my worry, or our worry, always is parents aren't a group. They're not a system like the system is. So they don't agree about any particular thing. So, but with your own individual child, I think it depends a lot on the amount of kind of social capital you have. So if I speak English, I know the system, I know who to go to, I know how it works, I'm much more likely to get what I want. And it is a problem. I mean, and I think it is important that we have trustees, but I think at the board level it would be helpful that, because people do phone us, and it's not our role in the system to try and I'm sure they phone you too. So we try and sort of support them, but we can't walk them through it. And trustees are overburdened by all the other things they have to do, and maybe they have other jobs. And that if school boards, I don't think provincially it works, but if a school board had, a hotline that people could phone, and somebody who's a little bit on the outside, so you're not phoning the people who you feel are the problem, that it would help, because it is very hard. And I talk to people with really difficult problems that sometimes they're not going to win, but they want some sort of support around, and it's hard to watch. And I know
And they're
that it's
beyond
way
your-
easier
beyond
for
your
me to
scope.
navigate the system than somebody else, and
Just
that is
can't imagine a
problematic.
centralized call help 188 to
goodness,
Queen's
no.
Park is
No,
going
that wouldn't do it
to
at all.
help
It has to be at the
concept.
board level.
Because an
It-
ombudsman,
yeah.
to me, centralization of education
at the board
is
level.
No,
not a
boards.
concept
At a
that
school
we need.
board.
But
At
would
the
you
school
all
board
agree
level.
that sending an email to the Ministry of Education
That's
less than useless?
Waste of time.
Totally.
Waste of time.
It's
Yeah.
a
Not
strong
the place to
response.
go.
I did a story today on full day kindergarten, a freedom of information legislation, freedom of information access request that I received, and a lot of parents were emailing the Ministry of Education because they were just troubled by the number of kids in their child's class, in this full day kindergarten class. And what I saw in this pile that I received was basically the same stock response, the same response, word for word, in each letter to the parent.
And it's also
So
not the ministries.
it's
I mean,
not-
the
but these
trustees
but you
are.
feel for these parents because
Yeah.
they have real issues. They said, my
Yeah.
kid is in a class of 35. My kid has special needs. What do I do? And you get the same response. The board-wide average is 26, and we're working towards it, and that's the end of it. So yes, the answer to that: don't go to the ministry. Go to your board. Go see what you can find out locally before you go higher in the system.
Does it ever make sense to go straight to the top? Email the Minister of Education herself. Are you likely to get
Might
your
make you
day?
feel better, but you're not going to get anything out of it.
We're not gonna get
No,
anything
and
out
we
of
tell
it.
parents, we always tell parents when we do get these calls, and sometimes they do break your heart, and a lot of times it's just, you wish the kids would be taught properly to begin with. So we provide remedial resources for parents. Or I say to parents, look, your child doesn't stop growing, so waiting 4 years for another election is just not going to work in that case. You have to take action now. You either have to find another school if the school system that you're dealing with is unresponsive. You have to get the remedial help that's needed. And sometimes if they have the resources, that's great, but most of the time they don't. It would be a dream if every parent could take a portion of their education dollar and say, I want to be able to buy remedial help for my child. Or if my child has autism, I want to buy the program for autism, or send them to a school in my area that has special program for that. That would be the ideal situation. That would solve a lot of parents' problems. Well, they're the ones with the children, and they're who are we serving?
Not advocating for a system where your socioeconomic status will
buy what you want.
buy what you want.
Yeah.
That's a very dangerous
No, that isn't
system.
that. I'm saying, but that's how it exists now. If you have money, you can go to a private school, you can move to a better neighborhood,
And
you
assume
can
those
you
are
can
all
buy the
better things in
tutoring
life
that's
that make
required.
better human beings.
But
I
I'm
do
not saying that. I'm saying give everybody, make the equality there. Give them what their tax money is paying for, and they should be able to have access, equal access.
PISA would show that the equity in the Canadian system is
Very
right
high.
up and very, very high. Now we can talk about PISA scores of math.
Perfect.
No, it's not perfect, but it's certainly ranked up there in the top 10 countries in the world. And I would say the equity piece, and I'm obviously very passionate about it, it's about the equity piece. I never want a two-tier system that some people can afford and some people can't.
I'm talking about exactly the opposite. We already have that system right now. We just don't have equity.
I mean, I guess there's another road we can go down here, but
sometimes you're defined by the neighborhood you live in, and we already know you're talking about test scores.
But PISA measures that and shows that the level of equity. We're seeing a lot of phenomenal mathematics scores from countries that it costs parents a great deal of money to be able to send their kids to school. What we do have is, at least in the system we have today, is broad equity. We can't reject the PISA scores for math, or accept the PISA scores for math and reject it for the equity.
But I think that the other piece in that, and it goes back to the sort of parent piece, is that when people have looked at systems where there's choice and specialty schools, the people that are most likely to choose, no matter what, whether you're given the money by the government or not, are the people of a certain class, a certain education. That's who makes the choice. So trying to make sure that parents are supported, families are supported, neighborhood schools are working well, but that parents get, and I do think there is an issue in the system.
Well, and I think it refers to the fact that we've noticed, certainly with working with children and youth mental health, that the integration of the other ministries and the other systems in social services has not worked very well. And that's part of the problem in accessing services for autism, for example. So that complicates all of it, and it can't be simply laid upon the education system. It really needs to be a societal direction to start integrating services.
In the majority, it's like, let's
Yes,
fix
exactly.
that problem.
Yes, have those conversations.
I point out we're less than 2 months away from a municipal election when the trustees that we have been talking about here, some of them will seek re-election, others will want to get elected for the first time. And I know we're all mortified when, for the provincial election, the turnout is about 50+% or so. Michael, do you know what it is offhand for trustee elections?
I can't tell you provincially, but I know in Oshawa it's 27% for municipal elections.
How do people, and forgive me, we got a minute left here, but how do people feel as if the trustee is really a legitimate place to get justice when so few people are participating in that democratic exercise?
That's certainly the campaign that OBSP has been working on with our partners in the French First Language, also our separate school, about being able to have a campaign, a social media campaign of what is the role of a trustee.
And I think we need to support people like Taylor Gunn and Student Vote,
Right.
so that our smallest citizens, our youngest citizens,
So
learn
that
to be democratic.
Exactly, and that if we focus more on citizenship, that maybe
That's
they
right.
would grow up to actually vote. That would be good.
Even for trustee elections?
Even
Absolutely.
for trustee,
Even for trustee.
absolutely,
Perhaps
for that
especially.
local
Especially.
level of
That's where it
democracy, it's
begins.
incredibly important.
Yes.
Absolutely. But we have to stop sort of, I mean, there's been a lot of bad mouthing of school boards too, and they are an important where a ton of decisions get made, so we definitely should be
they have-
paying
You
attention.
run again?
I am running again, yes,
Where do you run?
I run in Oshawa.
In Oshawa?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you going to win again?
I'm going to hope. But I also have a full-time job, so so.
There you go. We've heard that before. Okay,
Yes.
good. I want to thank all 5 of you for joining us here tonight under less than ideal circumstances, but you're troopers for showing up to TVO tonight, so thanks so much for joining us here on the 4th floor.
Thank you.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.